going to talk about a psychological operation which took place recently, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. Anyone who can guess what it is, shout out and I'll give you a free copy of my film. Now, I spoke in the last talk about the empire which is currently trying to engulf the world, trying to take over the world and create a one-world government. And it has used 9/11 and 7/7 as an excuse to take over the Middle East. And I went through the countries that have had regime change since 9/11. So we had the invasion of Afghanistan, we had the invasion of Iraq, we had the deposing of Colonel Gaddafi, and various other countries in this region also had regime change. Here they are. Now, some people say, well, there was revolutions in some of those countries. I disagree with that. I think that there were Asian provocateurs that triggered all of those regime changes to make them more compliant to the US agenda. There were countries which did not need to be changed that were already pro-US. We'll colour them in. We're left with 3 countries which are undoubtedly targets of the US. Syria, there was a vote in Parliament last year to determine whether we were going to invade and take military action against Syria, a country that's got nothing to do with the UK. We've got no right in that country to go into it militarily. Iran, rhetoric about Iran's alleged nuclear program. Pakistan, they've been dropping drone attacks willy-nilly on that country. So those 3 countries are definitely targeted. Now, let's just look at the modus operandi of the group that's doing this, the group that is creating regime change across the world. Right? Their modus operandi, whoever they are, they've targeted countries with a low approval of the US, Islamic and undemocratic, what we would consider dictatorships. They're the types of countries they've gone for. And they've always manufactured excuses and planted them in our media before they've gone into those countries. Okay? Now I'm going to list some of their excuses that they've manufactured. So, they used the excuse of 9/11 to invade Afghanistan. They used weapons of mass destruction to invade Iraq, which they didn't have. They've used Lockerbie to demonize Libya. Libya had absolutely nothing to do with Lockerbie. There's no evidence that Libya were involved in that. But Lockerbie was plastered all over our newspapers before they deposed Gaddafi. Chemical weapons is the rhetoric coming out about Syria, and Iran is nuclear weapons. So there's the modus operandi. They go for countries with a low US approval, Islamic, non-democratic, and they always think of an excuse. Now let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this group, which is trying to bring about a one-world government, chooses Southeast Asia as its next target. So we'll look at point 1 on my chart and ask which countries have a low US approval rating. Let's look at Burma. So the green represents how many people in that country approve of the US regime. So in Burma it's... Say again?
Are you talking about projects within the American century?
Well, that links into this, yeah. No. So in Thailand there is a 60% US approval rating. In Vietnam, 71% of the population approve of Barack Obama and the US. In Cambodia it's 62, the Philippines it's 85, Malaysia it's 34, Indonesia it's 38. So that's what those group of countries think of the US. Now let's look at religion, point 2 on the list. Which of these are Islamic countries? Because they're the countries that they go for. Malaysia and Indonesia are predominantly Islamic. The rest are Buddhist. Think the Philippines is Roman Catholic. Now let's look at democracy. Which of these countries are the most or least democratic? Well, you can actually look on the Global Democracy Ranking website, and Britain is position 10, the United Kingdom, this is America, and right at the bottom, the lowest one of all those countries in Southeast Asia is Malaysia. So, which country is going to be targeted in that region? We've got Islamic countries, the lowest US approval rating and the least democratic. They're going to target Malaysia, in my opinion, if they're going to go into that region and regime change it. But the modus operandi, as I explained before, they need a reason to go into Malaysia. Yeah? No one's going to believe Malaysia have got nuclear weapons. What can we do? Yeah. Anyone actually believe that the CIA or NORAD did not know where that missing Malaysian flight was? There are so many devices on that aeroplane which report back to Rolls-Royce, Boeing, CIA, NORAD would have to have known where that missing airliner was. In my opinion, all those news reports are complete bullshit. The US knew where that missing airliner was. In my opinion, this is an attempt to make Malaysia look like a tin pot dictatorship, just to nudge the public's perception into the view that Malaysia's regime really needs to be gotten rid of. Now, Barack Obama went to visit the Malaysian Prime Minister round about the time that when this Malaysian airliner was supposedly missing. And he was all the usual rhetoric, you know, the US is doing everything it can to help the Malaysian authorities find this missing plane. What a lie. Does anyone see anything in the body language of these photographs? I think Obama knows that Malaysia is on the list. And Malaysia did hold public hearings, sort of a mock trial, where they put George Bush on trial for war crimes and they voted him guilty. And they put that on state television. Right? Now, we've had other negative stories coming out of Malaysia, or stories that have come out of Malaysia that have had a negative twist put on them. So we had this guy, Gareth Huntley, went missing, and then he's found in the jungle. Now, what does that newspaper photograph say to you? It says to me, there's some kind of militaristic regime that we can't really trust, and it's putting in danger our attractive Western people, so it's a dangerous area. That's what that says to me. And there were reports that he'd supposedly had his throat slit, but I don't think there's been any post-mortem evidence of that. Obviously, it's a tragic story. Now, I read one newspaper report of the recent thing in the Ukraine, which said that, again, another Malaysian plane, they said, well, Malaysia are obviously partly to blame because they shouldn't have flown that plane over a war zone. So again, they're using these stories to demonize Malaysia, and this story made me laugh. This was just a few weeks ago. A mystery of British honeymooner who was being quizzed by police after he disappeared for 2 days in Malaysia, leaving his new bride frantic. So, guy gets married, goes on holiday to Kuala Lumpur, has an argument with his wife, goes in the huff for 2 days, and then comes back. Boom. That's the story. That happened to me once. I didn't end up in Mail Online. Right? It's a non-story. That happens every day. Why is it in Mail Online? I'll tell you why. Because they're using it to remind you of Gareth Huntley. So this story, this guy who's just wandered off from his wife, last month the body of Briton Gareth Huntley, 34, from Cricklewood, London, was found in a turtle conservation resort in Malaysia. We can't trust the Malaysians. All right? So they're using any story that they can to try and demonize their regime. So, you heard it here first. It wouldn't surprise me if there's military action in Malaysia at some point in the next 5 years. But what they have to do, they have to just do this psychological operation on the public so that it's not opposed. Now, I'm going to talk about freedom of expression because I think this links in to this agenda to break down trust in society. This is Section 5 of the 1986 Public Order Act. Up until very recently, it was illegal to insult someone, right? But the police were abusing this law. Anyone who was shouting something out in the crowd, the police were using it just to arrest them. And what is an insult to one person could be a compliment to someone else. So freedom of speech groups were really annoyed at this law, that it was being abused, and they wanted it reformed, right? So they started a campaign in May 2012 to drop that word insulting from the law. So it would not be illegal to insult people, right? Now, one person who was very prominent in this campaign was Rowan Atkinson. And he spoke about it at a news conference, or at a conference, on the 16th of October 2012. I'm just going to show you some extracts from it.
My starting point when it comes to the consideration of any issue relating to free speech is my passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely. The most precious thing in life, I think, is food in your mouth. And the third most precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself. That is because I have enjoyed free expression in this country all my professional life and fully expect to continue to do so. So my concerns are less for myself and more for those more vulnerable because of their lower profile. Like the man arrested in Oxford for calling a police horse gay, or the teenager arrested for calling the Church of Scientology a cult, or the cafe owner arrested for displaying passages from the Bible on a TV screen. When I heard of some of these more ludicrous offences and charges, I remembered that I had been here before in a fictional context. I once did a show called Not the 9 O'Clock News some years ago, and we did a sketch where Griff Rhys-Jones played Constable Savage, a manifestly racist police officer to whom I, as his station commander, is giving a dressing down for arresting a black man on a whole string of ridiculous, trumped-up and ludicrous charges. The charges for which Constable Savage arrested Mr. Winston Kadogo of 55 Mercer Road were these: walking on the cracks in the pavement, walking in a loud shirt in a built-up area during the hours of darkness, and one of my favourites, walking around all over the place. He was also arrested for urinating in a public convenience and looking at me in a funny way. Who would have thought that we would end up with a law that would allow life to imitate art so exactly? I read somewhere a defender of the status quo claiming that the fact that the gay horse case was dropped after the arrested man refused to pay the fine, and that the Scientology case was also dropped at some point during the court process, was proof that the law was working well, ignoring the fact that the only reason these cases were dropped was because of the publicity that they had attracted. The police sensed that ridicule was just around the corner and withdrew their actions. But what about the thousands of other cases that did not enjoy the oxygen of publicity, that weren't quite ludicrous enough to attract media attention? Even for those actions that were withdrawn, people were arrested, questioned, taken to court, and then released. You know, that isn't a law working properly. That is censoriousness of the most intimidating kind, guaranteed to have, as Lord Dear says, a chilling effect on free expression and free protest. Merely stating an alternative point of view to the orthodoxy can be interpreted as insult. A new but intense desire to gag uncomfortable voices of dissent. The best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it.
Now, anyone remember seeing that on mainstream news? Why didn't they have their reporters there? And just one point, who would you rather have as next Prime Minister? Mr. Bean gets my vote every time. And I'm going to come on to that in a second. So what happened was there was a vote in the House of Lords, and they voted quite strongly to get rid of that word insulting because of this campaign, 150 to 54. And the government didn't oppose it. They just let it sail through, and I think they were probably aware that if they had opposed it, they would have been ridiculed by the likes of Rowan Atkinson, because it is a ridiculous law. All right, so that came into force on the 1st of February 2014, and I suspect the government weren't happy about having to change that law, because it takes away police powers of arrest. It says that you can shout things out at people if you want to, as long as it's not abusive, if it's just insulting. Now, I'm just going to write Rowan Atkinson's name next to him there. 2 months after that law was changed, right, and I think Rowan Atkinson was probably instrumental in that happening, someone with his influence and following, this newspaper headline appeared. Now, this story, right, it turned out was completely false. There was not an element of truth in it, that these giant rats had been discovered somewhere in the UK. So this is a total lie. In my opinion, the main thing that's going on in this front page is Rowan Atkinson, and that story's been put there as a subliminal, right? Rowan Atkinson, right? Look at the way that the tail is hanging down from his neck. You might ask, well, why would they do that on the front page of a newspaper? If you think about news, it is a bit more fragmented than it used to be. You have got a lot of channels on Sky, you've got the internet, but one place that still has millions of captured viewers is newspaper stands. So if 1 million people have bought that newspaper, I would suggest 10 million people have read the front page. So you've still got a vast amount of people looking at that, and that goes straight into your subconscious, right? In my opinion, this is a subconscious attempt to nudge the public to a place where they don't really approve of Rowan Atkinson. Because can you imagine Rowan Atkinson in a debate with Ed Miliband or David Cameron? You know, he was very statesmanlike in that clip, wasn't he? He was speaking from his heart. Just compare that to Miliband, the clip that I showed you. They do not want their puppets upstaged by an intelligent, witty man like Rowan Atkinson. So this is manipulation of the worst kind, in my opinion. Subconscious planting of suggestion. Okay. Here's another subliminal. This is a Kate McCann subliminal, or McCann story. So the bottom right-hand corner there is a separate advert, and it's for the Financial Services Authority. Why the Financial Services Authority need to advertise in the first place, I don't know. But they've chosen to put the title of their advert as The Truth, right under where it says Missing Madeline and Mum Kate. I don't think that's an accident. Okay, now, after that law changed, round about 7 or 8 months after, these ridiculous stories about modern-day slavery started appearing in our press. And they're all bogus, in my opinion. They're all exaggerations and concoctions. It's a Hegelian dialectic. So they're creating a problem, then a reaction, and then they're going to come up with a solution. And the solution is to bring in a new law, which I'm going to explain to you. But they've got to get these stories in the media first before they bring in this draconian new law. One story caught my eye as a classic, contrived Hegelian dialectic problem-reaction-solution farce. The story of 3 women rescued from a house in Lambeth after allegedly being held as slaves for 30 years. This story was put out by most, if not all, of our gutter press. The BBC website said, a Malaysian woman, 69, an Irish woman, 57, and a Briton, 30, were rescued on the 25th of October. It emerged on Thursday. A man, 73, and a woman, 67, understood to be married, were arrested in Lambeth and later bailed until January. The Home Secretary, Theresa May, said details were still emerging in Lambeth, South London, but it was clear that many other victims were hidden in plain sight across the country. It transpired that one of these so-called slaves had been working, wait for it, drum roll, in a nail bar. I'm enslaved in a nail bar, please let me out. I can assure you a nail bar is not the sort of place I would want to be enslaved in either. I spent 30 years imprisoned against my will. Oh really? Where did you do your time? Wandsworth nail bar. Really? The screws are really cruel in them nail bars. They only allow 5-minute fag breaks, and you have to stick to set fingernail designs. There is just no artistic freedom there. If a person abuses another person, do we not already have laws that deal with this? Theresa May then starts going on saying that we need to deal with modern-day slavery by inventing new laws. Thousands of Geordie men will be getting locked up for being heard to utter the forbidden words. Make me a cup of tea, pet. I then saw a psychologist being interviewed talking about how charismatic people with strong personalities can start cults with the aim of enslaving people and how we need to protect ourselves against them. So that's what this is all about, controlling people who spread ideology, or perhaps even the truth. This farcical story shows just how scared the manipulators are of certain ideas which are growing in the public mindset. Ideas that are based on truth. That's it, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state, and this applies to the UK right here, right now. New laws to clamp down on modern-day slavery are being laid down to stamp out the enemy of the state, the truth. Alright, so there was a number of completely ridiculous stories about supposed modern-day slavery, and then just very recently we had the Queen's speech.
A bill will be introduced to strengthen the powers to prevent modern slavery. and human trafficking, while improving support for victims of such crimes.
So they've planted their bogus stories, they've created a bit of interest in it, and now the Queen is saying we need new laws, and they're intending to bring these new laws in the next Parliament. Now, one thing that tells me is that the manipulators who are orchestrating all this, operating with the Crown, the government and the media, all as one, right? Because they need all three in order to be able to bring in what I'm going to describe to you in a second. Now, there are two draft slavery bills, which these are proposed as going to be new laws. There's the government draft slavery bill and there's the joint committee draft bill. They both define what they mean by slavery and what they're going to make illegal. Now, the top one is the government one, the second one is the joint committee one. I'm going to selectively read the joint committee one. For the purposes of this Act, slavery means the control by a person of a second person in such a way as by which any person obtains a benefit through the use, management, profit, transfer or disposal of that second person. If I ask anyone in this audience to go to the bar and get me a pint of lager and I'll give you the money and you give me it, I've broken the law. I've broken that law. That is a law against having someone do you a favour. That's what that is. Now, this one's not quite as bad, but neither of these laws talk about whether the person has agreed to do that favour. So they're making the doing of favours or requesting a favour illegal. That's what they're trying to do. This one says P requires another person to perform forced or compulsory labour and the circumstances are such that P knows or ought to know that the person is being required to perform forced or compulsory labour. I mean, that's just completely ambiguous and I don't see how it's enforceable. I can envisage situations in 3 or 4 years' time where you might have a married couple or two friends or any sort of club where they fall out. People fall out in their day-to-day lives, yeah? So they think, all those favours I did for them, is that the police? I've been enslaved for the last 3 years. The courts are going to be full, right? Now, I ran a campaign in 2012 called Tell Your MP about 7/7, where 100 people went on my website, they downloaded some documents and printed them out and took them to their MPs. They could have me locked up for doing that if this law is passed. This is a very, very dangerous law. It's trying to make requesting favours from someone illegal. And in a place like here, the Welsh Valleys, where there is a very good community spirit, I find, people will help you and will not request payment. What's it going to do? Every time you want someone to do something or communicating with someone, you're going to be scared to ask them to do something. That's going to erode trust, isn't it? In the cement which holds us all together. Do we really want this? Because we've got laws, we've got employment law, right? We've got minimum wage. So they're not talking about employment here. Right? And they're not talking about shackling someone in traditional type slavery. They're talking about what they mean by mental slavery. Sorry, what they mean by modern slavery. They mean mental slavery. They're saying we're going to try and control what you can say to someone. So they're limiting your freedom of expression. And this is very, very dangerous. Now, I've written to my MP to complain about this. I do not want this law passed. And I was going to ask you lot to do the same, but I'm not sure now because I might get done for enslaving you. But just think about the implications of this law. This, in my opinion, is not being brought in to stop people being taken advantage of. It's the opposite. It's a Yuri Bezmenov subversion technique, and it will have a very detrimental effect on society. Now, I'm going to talk about the censorship of my TV show because several people have asked me today, is it coming back on television? Well, I'm not 100% sure. As you may know, I got removed from TV for about 9 months because of an item that I put on where I was challenging the official line of the Woolwich incident where some guy allegedly had his head hacked off in the middle of the street. Now, Ofcom produced this report as to why they said that my programme was offensive, and what I've done is I've taken all of their quotations from my show and I've clipped them all together. So this is why my show was taken off air. One important factor is there is no photograph or video showing a decapitated corpse. We can see a body lying on the road, but it's not obvious whether there's even a head there or not.
Right, so it's supposed to believe that in that corner of the pavement with trees overhead, they tried to hack his head off. They suddenly got out of the meat killer, tried to hack his head off.
So this is off the road they've tried to do this?
Yeah, on the pavement.
All right.
Now that would have, about 8 pints of blood would have spurted out if they'd done that. They had blood all over themselves, which they didn't have. And, and the important thing is there's no blood on the pavement. You happen to have a meat cleaver, you get out, you hack his head off. Why would you want to do that? And you then drag him out into the middle of the road. It makes absolutely no sense. The only sense it makes is as a stage prop for public horror.
Right,
so
okay.
just ask yourself, if you had seen somebody hack someone's head off and got blood all over his hands with a meat cleaver, would you stand there a few feet in front of him with a camera photographing him and talking to him? Would you do that?
Of course you wouldn't.
So that is an obviously staged event, and the dead giveaway here is the little old lady with a shopping trolley who walks past, totally unconcerned, as this apparent horror event is going on. And that tells you that red blood on the hand was photoshopped on. There was no red blood on the hands. And it's only on his hands, not anyone else on his clothing, as would have happened if
right.
You know.
So they've done a very badly orchestrated false flag event in Boston. Now they've done one in Woolwich in the UK.
Well,
can I just put this to you that you've got the people who do see through these lies, okay, such as yourself, people who actually critically analyse, look at the evidence, and see if there's any mileage in what the mainstream is saying, and then unpick it, and then we know it's all a fake event. Okay, it's easy to see. Right, now I would have been quite happy to issue an apology if that is indeed offensive. This is one complaint that Ofcom got, and after I was taken off air, the TV company got 400 complaints from viewers. So where's the democracy there? But I would have been quite happy to issue an apology and continue on in the same vein with the same types of programmes I've been producing. But that has not been allowed to happen, because the TV company are so scared now of producing anything which questions the government's narrative or anything against, let's say, police corruption and this kind of thing, that they only want programmes about UFOs from me. That's all they're prepared to air, because they're worried about getting a £30,000 fine and getting their licence taken off them. So my hands are tied now. I can't put certain things out that challenge authority. And the other thing they've done is they've requested more money from me for the shows. So the last series of 13 shows that I put out, the TV company want £3,000 plus VAT from me. So I pay to produce the programmes, and then I have to pay them £3 grand plus VAT to get them to put them on. Right? I don't get paid to make these TV shows. So that's why I'm charging £12 instead of £10, because I've agreed to give the TV company 30% of the proceeds from these talks. So I'm subsidising the TV show. Right? The other thing they've done is they've stuck me on at midnight, and a lot of people have been having problems recording the show as well. So, and this is ongoing. Yeah? So that one incident is still affecting my freedom of speech now, because I'm not allowed to say the sorts of things that I'm saying in this talk on television. All right? So I'm not sure which direction I want to take. Am I just going to broadcast on the internet, or am I just going to do just UFO stuff and stay on television? Now, I've mentioned subversive influences, and a lot of people say, well, what can you do? Because not everyone's going to go to Portugal and try and make a documentary that's going to undermine the government and what I'm doing. But there are things that you can do, and I've had a little think about this regarding subversive influences. Here's one of them. Throw your television set out of the window. All right, if you don't want to do that, the first point is that your armour or your guidance comes from within yourself. That sounds a little bit religious, but it's true. You're not going to get it from anyone else. You're not going to get it from anything that you read. It comes from within yourself, right? Your armour against subversive influences. Try and know or learn which influences to shut off from. Write them down. I mean, I haven't even mentioned films and radio. Anyone listen to the Jeremy Vine show? That is just the most disgusting, fear-mongering. I put that on for 15 seconds before I've had enough of it. Jeremy Vine. So know or learn which influences to shut off from, and think carefully about what you put value on. So the Peppa Pig stuff that I showed you before, Peppa doesn't like nature, so they're trying to make people worship material things. They're trying to create consumerist materialism. If you don't have your health, you're not going to have any of it. Yeah? Don't spend long periods under subversive influences. I only watch the news for about 15 minutes every week. That's all you need in order to get up on the propaganda. Yeah? You don't need to sit in front of the TV for long periods of time. And give the influencers labels which describe what they really are. Dancing on shite. I call Greg's dregs, and there are many others. Make them up. I call the news. I don't say, well, are we going to put the news on? I say, are we going to put the stress on? But it's not always as simple as that, is it? And it's not always the woman who's addicted to subversive influences. Sometimes it's the man, or it might be teenagers or grandparents, or whatever your situation is. You might be living in the same space as someone who can't get enough of all of this, and you just want to switch off from it. What the hell do you do? Because a lot of people contact me about that, and we saw the comment in the slide that she never has the soaps off. It's quite a tricky thing, but I've had to think about it. This comes from cognitive behavioural therapy, which can be used for the positive. It's not all mind control. So write a letter from the other person's perspective. So imagine that you are that other person, and explain to yourself why you need all of these subversive influences. That will then enable you to understand where they're coming from. Then put yourself in an imaginary trial. So there's a judge, a jury, and the other person. What would you say to that jury to convince them that all of the subversive influences are completely bad and ought to be taken away from your life? Right? And once you've done that, imagine that the other person who loves the subversive influences is drowning in a river. Now, if they were drowning in a river, would you point at them and say, stop drowning in that bloody river? Because they are drowning in a river of subversion. You wouldn't, would you? They need support. So no, it's not their fault. It's the subverters' fault. They're victims of subversion, people who are addicted to this stuff. No ticking off, right? They're victims. They need support. Talk to their heart before their head and show some compassion. Try and get them to propose a solution, an alternative to just being absorbed in these subversive influences, and then they're more likely to follow the solution. And recognise and give gratitude if they give suggestions. All right, well, if we put the lights back on now, that's the end of part one. We'll have a 20-minute break, and I'll see you in part two to talk about the secret space program. Thank you. On June the 20th, I received an email from Information TV, that's the company that runs Showcase TV, informing me that a complaint had been made to Ofcom by a viewer about a recent programme. The programme in question was an interview with Dr. Nick Kollerstrom concerning the Woolwich incident of the 22nd of May when soldier Lee Rigby was allegedly killed in the street. In over 3 years of broadcasting on Showcase TV, I have only been made aware of 2 previous complaints about Richplanet programmes by viewers to Ofcom. In both these cases, Ofcom ruled that Richplanet was not in breach of their regulations. The nature of the complaint was stated as offensive content matter, programme focused on the Woolwich murder, and that authorities colluded to stage the death of drummer Lee Rigby in Woolwich, stating that the death did not occur, that the blood on the suspect's hand was not real, and that the police shot the suspects in staged event. A director of Information TV stated that Ofcom had requested a copy of the show to determine if an investigation was necessary. He also stated his reservations about broadcasting this kind of material and expressed doubts over whether the channel would continue broadcasting Richplanet TV. In the programme, which you can watch in the video below, I discussed with Dr. Nick Kollerstrom the inconsistencies in media reports about the killing of soldier Lee Rigby in Woolwich on the 22nd of May. We suggested in the programme that glaring media inconsistencies suggest the incident was most likely a contrived event, probably orchestrated by an intelligence agency in what Nick Kollerstrom refers to as state-fabricated terror. In the show, Nick compared this incident to previous incidents which he also believes were fabricated, such as the Boston bombings, Sandy Hook shootings and the London bombings. After receiving what I believe was a single complaint from an unnamed viewer, we are not allowed to know who it is, Ofcom launched an investigation to determine if the programme breached any of its regulations. Now, on the 22nd of July there was still no decision from Ofcom, but I received an email from Information TV informing me that as of that date, the 22nd of July, they would be giving me 1 month notice to terminate my contract and they no longer wish to broadcast my show. This decision was not because Ofcom at that point in time had made any ruling, but because of the amount of work involved in dealing with Ofcom investigations. It's expensive and the risk to the broadcaster's licence outweighs the benefit of broadcasting my show. That was the reason that the channel gave. The channel has made this statement: Information TV Limited has terminated the agreement to broadcast Richplanet programmes. Fred Perkins, CEO of Information TV Limited, has told us, "I'm sorry that for purely commercial reasons we can no longer continue to carry Richplanet programmes. We have been pleased to carry what have been a series of stimulating and thought-provoking material which clearly merit visibility. We've enjoyed working with Richplanet and happy that we have enabled Richplanet to achieve higher visibility through national broadcast TV." Broadcast television in the UK is, however, subject to strict regulatory control under a regime which has set the UK up as an exemplar of high standards. UK broadcast TV is admired worldwide. Richplanet's programmes are often understandably controversial. They sometimes push the boundaries of regulatory compliance to the limit. The regulator has to take up and investigate complaints from whatever source and apply the rules under which they are obliged to regulate channels. We cannot blame them for that, even if we may sometimes feel we are victims of unfairness. However, we, Information TV, are a small business. We are not campaigners for any cause, but we are, as a service business, simply trying to provide low-cost broadcast TV visibility to propositions which might not otherwise reach national coverage, but we have to operate on a commercial basis. Regulatory investigations cost us seriously in time and money. With considerable regret, we just cannot afford to continue with Richplanet. We wish Richard and his colleagues best wishes, and we will continue to follow with interest the areas which Richplanet explores. Now, I would respond to the point about the programme being controversial by saying that Richplanet TV is an evidence-based programme which seeks to get to the truth. I would argue that it merely seems controversial when compared to mainstream programmes, because their programmes on the whole are not evidence-based and their news programmes are being manipulated to propagate fake or contrived narratives for a range of political purposes. So, no more Richplanet TV on Showcase TV. This does not mean the end of Richplanet, however. Oh no, just a mere pothole in the road. I'm currently looking at various options as to where to broadcast material in the future. The website will continue broadcasting material, and if you want to be updated on developments, you can submit your email address to us at the top right corner of the richplanet.net website. I will be arranging some more speaking events later in the year. It's a pity, because I did have some interesting material to put on television, including an interview with a builder who discovered an ancient underground pyramid in Wales in the 1960s. But hey, who wants to see that when you can see Daniel O'Donnell? Now, you may be asking, was this orchestrated deliberately in order to provide an excuse to get rid of Richplanet from television? The answer is, I don't really know, because as I said, I don't know who made the complaint, and I have not been party to any communications between the channel and Ofcom. If you want to watch the episode which lost us our contract, please watch the video below. I'm joined today by Nick Kollerstrom, and I'm in London, and we're going to be talking about the incident which took place in Woolwich on the 22nd of May 2013, which strangely took place at 2:20 p.m. There was two perpetrators involved. One of them was aged 22, and they were called Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebolawe, just by coincidence. Okay, so this is where tragically a soldier has died and he's allegedly had his head cut off. So you think there's glaring inconsistencies in what the media have told us about this event, Nick. It involved someone getting knocked over by a car, and then events took place after that. Just start
Yes,
the ball
Richard,
rolling.
this is a contrived, fabricated event, which is not what it seems. And like other recent fabricated terror events in America, the Boston bombing, the Sandy Hook, you've got actors involved and you don't have real deaths. That's the huge difference. The earlier fabricated terror events, like the London bombings of 2005, Madrid 2004, had real deaths, and that was the whole point of them. That was why the public was so aghast and horrified, and that was the point of fabricated terror.
So it had fake perpetrators, but real victims.
Real victims, yeah. Here you've got what a skeptical American website called Vic Sims simulated. There was a real death of this drummer fellow, let's call him DLR, drummer Lee Rigby, who really died, but not in the road. It's fairly clear that they're using his corpse and thereby eliciting real grief and horror from his family, which carried the whole story and gave it credibility. But the fellow did not die in that scene.
Right, because one important factor is there is no photograph or video showing a decapitated corpse. We can see a body lying in the road, but it's not obvious whether there's even a head there or not. No imagery has been provided to provide proof of that. We're just going purely by the mainstream narrative, yeah?
Totally, yeah.
Okay, and so just start from the start, Nick. They're supposedly driving along in a car, they mount the pavement, and then they knock over Lee Rigby. Is that what allegedly happened?
Supposedly, and the car ends inches from these two columns which are supporting a traffic notice, and the whole front of the car is crumpled up, which would have been a major impact crash to do that, and the two people in the car would have been in no state to just get out of it, let alone start hacking someone else to death. That car, the front being crumpled up next to these two pillars, which are totally untouched. Scrutiny of those pillars shows they're not in any way damaged, nothing impacted them. That tells you right at the start that it's a fabricated event. That is a stage set prop right there.
All right, we've also got inconsistencies with photographs of the body in the road with regards to the blood.
Yeah.
Just tell us about that.
Well, what happens is that the trail of blood starts from right on the other side of that those two posts, a foot or two from the front of the car, and an overhead photo shows a trail of blood from there out into the road. So you're supposed to believe that in that corner of the pavement with trees overhead, they tried to hack his head off. They suddenly got out of the meat killer, tried to hack his head off.
So this is off the road they've tried to do this?
Yeah, on the pavement.
All right.
Now that would have, about 8 pints of blood would have spurted out if they'd done that. They had blood all over themselves, which they didn't have. And and the important thing is there's no blood on the pavement. We've got photographs of the front of the car which do not show that blood. The blood only appears from an overhead photo from a helicopter looking down that shows this trail of blood, which has been put in on that photo. It's not there on ground shots. That's the important thing.
Right, okay. And they've then, for some reason, moved the body into the road?
For some reason. Why would you want to do that? If you get out, it's totally senseless behaviour. Knock down someone who you've got no way of identifying. All you can see is walking away from you when you knock him down. He's got a T-shirt, help the heroes. You've got no way of identifying who he is. You don't have the urge, you happen to have a meat cleaver, you get out, you hack his head off. Why would you want to do that? And you then drag him out into the middle of the road. It makes absolutely no sense. The only sense it makes is as a stage prop for public horror. That's the only way it makes sense.
So you think that Lee Rigby was already dead before he was knocked
Correct,
over.
yeah. The proof
or
is that,
allegedly.
that body in the middle of the road
You
has
think-
absolutely no blood around it.
Right.
You get witnesses which may not be reliable, saying they saw somebody hacking that body in the middle of the road, but there is no blood around that body.
There was also people videoing events after this took place, and the guy stood there with a meat cleaver in his hand, supposedly with blood on his hand, and the person's just calmly filming someone who's just hacked someone's head.
Yeah,
So
he's quite calm. He's not in any frenzy, as you would be if you'd done this brutal, terrible murder. And let's point out that after this event, they stand around for 20 minutes before the police arrive. So I would say they've been somehow programmed or conditioned to stand around and wait for the police. That's like their instruction, to wait for the police to arrive. And while they do it, they talk to people. People apparently come up and talk to them while they're holding a meat cleaver. This is where I think you've got actors on the stage. You have got actors in this drama. Let's come back now. Let's come to what you're alluding to, which I suspect was done at a quite different time, perhaps a week before or something. This guy is talking to two cameras. There's two different cameras filming him. You've got two different angle shots. So this fella holding
these
a
are
meat cleaver.
like phone cameras, this kind of thing.
Presumably,
They're not
yeah.
media, right?
So
okay.
just ask yourself, if you had seen somebody hack someone's head off and got blood all over his hands with a meat cleaver, would you stand there a few feet in front of him with a camera photographing him and talking to him? Would you do
No,
that?
of course you wouldn't.
So that is an obviously staged event, and the dead giveaway here is the little old lady with a shopping trolley who walks past, totally unconcerned, as this apparent horror event is going on. And that tells you that red blood on the hand was photoshopped on. There was no red blood on the hands. And it's only on his hands, not anywhere else on his clothing, as would have happened if
right
you know.
now, I think, Nick, in the mainstream media, comments like that, people saying, "Oh, there was blood added in afterwards. It's all been photoshopped," have been dealt with. What have mainstream said in order to back up their narrative that there's blood being photoshopped in? Have they denied it, or what are they saying? You mentioned Alex Jones before, didn't you? The
Well, Alex Jones' angle, one of the angles is that you see extra luminously red blood on the hands, and the red line on the side of the curb is highlighted, it's glowing, so they've enhanced the red in the whole picture to try and make it look even redder.
So in your opinion, the blood was added?
Yeah, it can't just be on the hands and nowhere else. It's put in, but he is holding a meat cleaver, and somehow they wound him up. That guy was totally controlled, manipulated. He's a product of MI5, British intelligence, to be in that situation, talking to the camera.
Right. Well, we'll come on to the claims of him having previous involvement with MI5, but I just want to stay on the evidence. It seems that there's so many flaws in this contrived event, if that's indeed what it is. How is it that they can't stage these false flag operations, so that we are fooled by them? I mean, 9/11. It was many years before people started
I
to
would
question
say
it.
that this is a terrific masterpiece to have a guy with a meat cleaver ranting at the camera.
But you said that you thought that might have been filmed a few weeks earlier.
I do
But
indeed.
if it was, they've got a woman walking past with a shopping trolley.
Yeah.
Right. Is that not just blatant, sort of in your face? We can't do this properly.
Well, they know the media will just put up with it and accept it. That's what the Illuminati, or whatever you call them, the vampire elite, know they can get away. They know they can do that. Once they project the great, powerful emotions, hate and fear, that blocks out the higher thought centres, and you get a primitive logic, and that is the level at which the story rides and is accepted.
I mean, that's the motivation for planning these kind of events. And it's also to justify their actions in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah.
But just to come back to how poorly this seems to have been orchestrated and planned, is it the case that they're even taunting people like you and people like me by making such a sloppy job of what they're doing so that we can easily see through it?
Yeah.
It seems that that could be deliberate.
Well, Richard, certainly that was what everyone was saying with the Boston bombing story,
right.
The marathon. That was such a crappy job. You could see all these lousy actors lying on the floor pretending to have been harmed by a bomb, and fake blood splattered everywhere. And on the other side of the road, you could see all these guys with black hats and the skull logo, and they were quite obviously the perpetrators.
Right.
I would have thought that was the arch example of
Okay.
a story so badly made that it was falling apart.
So they've done a very badly orchestrated false flag event in Boston. Now
Yeah.
they've done one in Woolwich in the UK.
Well,
Can I just put this to you? That you've got the people who do see through these lies, okay, such as yourself, people who actually critically analyse, look at the evidence and see if there's any mileage in what the mainstream is saying, and then unpick it, and then we know it's all a fake event, okay, it's easy to see, right? But then they've got the other group of people who will only believe what mainstream media say, and they can say whatever they want. Do you think they're trying to draw a line between the two groups of people? The group of people who will only believe something if it's on the BBC, and you've got people like you and me who will question everything that's on the BBC and only believe it if there's evidence of what they're saying, right? And by orchestrating these events so badly, is that drawing a line between the two and separating the two groups? Do you see what I mean? To make them to create division, because you go down the pub, people who can see through this, and it's easy to see through it, are, you know, annoyed.
Yeah.
But then you've got other people laughing at them who will only believe the BBC. Do you think they're trying to create more of a division?
Well, possibly. That's a bit complicated. A lot of people realise that the story doesn't make any sense at all at any level, but you've just got the primal hate image of this guy with a red machete and apparently a corpse in the road, and although the actual photo does not show any corpse in the road, and I could mention here that the corpse is in two very different positions on different photographs.
Right.
I think our business is to get people to think about these. You are getting delusion fabricated, the media are complicit, and to fight against these agents of deception, of delusion, who are pushing the world in war, trying to start World War III, our best way of doing that is to unweave these fabricated events.
All right.
And we've got to do the best we can to show people how this is made up and how they manipulate the deep emotions to prevent rational analysis.
Right. Now, okay, well, let's just go back to the what happened, because the two guys hung around for 5 minutes or longer. And
20 minutes. 20 minutes,
and the police arrived. So then what happened?
Well, supposedly the police, there's a quote from actual local police saying, we weren't consulted, we weren't called, we didn't recognise any of the people who actually arrived, and we didn't recognise any of the people on the scene as locals, okay? Then these police arrived, and people said, this isn't a real police car, it hasn't got the right ID and codes to be a real police car. This is some sort of special operations people who come, and then there's there's footage of a shootout that happened. Supposedly these guys, after hanging around and chatting to people for 20 minutes, they were asking, can you please film me? People on the bus saying, look, can you please film me? So they were programmed, they're behaving like programmed people. First of all, you hang around here, whether or not they did anything chopping the body, you try and get photographed, you try and get seen, you wait for the police to arrive. Then what do you do when the police arrive? You walk towards the police car. That's what they were, as if they were programmed to do that.
Right.
A witness said they did not shoot the police, they did not had their hands by the sides, they walked towards the police car. That's what they've been able to do. Then we're told the police shot them.
Right.
Okay?
Okay. Now, you said to me earlier that you don't think we will ever see any one of these guys giving an interview on camera. Well, why is that then, Nick?
Yeah, I bet these two lads are silent now forever. This always happens when these patsies are set up, Islamic fake terror patsies. They're given a role, they step into that role, they fulfill it, and then there's silence. The rest is silence, and you just have media fabrication. You get the wittering of journalists, and the thing you really want to hear, the opinion of the guys in jail of what happened, you cannot ever get that.
Right.
Right. I mean, I tried that with one or two people involved in the London bombings.
Right, and
you can't get to them in jail.
But presumably we're going to see a trial of these guys if they're still alive, and with the jury giving evidence. So would the truth not come out there? Will we not get their version of how it was contrived or not in a trial?
Well, we should do, Richard, but that's my hunch that we won't hear anything.
They'll concoct something such that they're not put on in a public trial. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I guess. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right, now let's come on to this MI5 link, because somebody alleged that the main perpetrator had involvement with MI5 and was promptly arrested. Is that right?
Yeah, a close long-time friend of his went into the BBC Newsnight studio and told the story of how he was hassled by MI5, and he went back home to Michael Adibalajo, went back home to Kenya trying to get away from it all, and found it was even worse there. Not only was he tortured, but he was also sexually molested, and he then came back to London. So he was entrapped. He kind of felt there was no escape from this, and somehow he looks like a controlled being. And I personally believe in pain drug hypnosis, whereby they put someone under drugs at unconscious level, and you then give commands as to what they're going to do, and that is then activated at a certain scene.
Now, you mentioned earlier, Nick, that the Kent Freedom Movement have got some videos on their website about this event. Just tell us what those videos are.
Oh, well, I think that they show very well aspects of the fakery involved, and for example, there's a very blurred image that the Mirror put out, a Mirror website, whereby you can see people, various shady figures coming out from the car to put this body in the middle of the road, and you see this process going on, but various figures are involved, and it looks as if that body has still got a head when it's put out in the middle of the road. That's an example, and there are various witnesses, certain witnesses, that they expose them as being actors.
Right. Now, you also mentioned Barack Obama made a speech. Was it a few days after this event?
It was the very day after. He made a long speech, very important, in which he was trying to say that he wanted to close Guantanamo Bay, and he didn't really like killer drones striking in other countries, as if he was trying to rein in both these things, but rather lacked the power to do so. I think he had to mention this London terror incident the day before, and I feel that was planted there to make sure that he didn't back out from the war on terror, and keep him on track.
Right, so it's possibly been ordered from across the pond then, this event maybe, or you think they're kind of one and the same entity? Maybe?
Yeah, I think they're one and the same entity, and you get here a big campaign for the Save the Heroes. Is it Save the Heroes T-shirt or campaign that happened the week after, synchronised with this event. So I think it's both sides of the pond that what I call the axis of evil, which is dedicated to everlasting war, and that is the British and American terror intelligence services. They organise these kind of events.
Right, and do you think there's going to be more events in the UK like this? What I know it's an impossible question, but
well, this is the first time that terror returns to the UK for quite a while, and it reaffirms the basic theme of Islamic terror, which they evidently felt needed reinforcing.
So you know that you said that some of the newer, more recent fake events, they're not only the perpetrators are not only fake, but the victims are sometimes fake now as well. If that's the case, they haven't got lots of angry relatives wanting trials, etc. So it's easy to get away with. What about the parents of Lee Rigby? Would they not be wanting to get to the bottom of what really happened, and would they not be seeing that?
Well, they totally believe it. They absolutely believe that their son was killed as the media described.
Right. Yeah. But would they not want to be at a trial with these two guys in the dock, being questioned and cross-examined to try and get to the truth? See what I'm saying? So there is still grieving parents of the victim, albeit we don't think that he died there. He was probably killed before and placed there. That's what you suspect, isn't it?
Well, I think we need to follow the trial closely if anything does come out like that.
And just one other thing that you mentioned also, the coroner, the cause of death.
Yeah. Immediately after, there was an inquest with the coroners giving the cause of death, or rather refusing to state that DLR was how DLR was killed. They said they would not make any statement about the cause of death. That was immediately after the event, and then some days later, when the 22-year-old accomplice went on trial, which he just started, that was evidently not sufficient, and the papers reported that the cause of death was multiple injuries, which again, if somebody's had his head chopped off, you're not going to say the cause of death was multiple injuries. It's a totally non-committal statement from the medics concerned.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to see if there is a trial, a public trial with a jury, But thanks very much for speaking to us about it today, Nick. Just remind us of your website, because you've got quite a long article about this on your site.
terroronthetube.co.uk.
And also the Kent Freedom Movement have got, as you say, videos as well. Okay, thanks very much, Nick.